Senator Reeves, you are going to give our opening statement, 90 seconds, sir.
Well, thank you all, and thank you for opening up this beautiful place and the opportunity to gather as Republicans. I think the rain will cut out, but let me just tell you all, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be running and humbled to be running for lieutenant governor. You know, I grew up kind of turning wrenches. We were talking about that earlier in the back days here in my dad's service station at one time, and it's remarkable what you can do when you put your mind to it. I'm just absolutely blessed. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. We'll talk more about my background in a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Also with us today is Delegate Glenn Davis from here in Hampton Roads. Delegate Davis.
Well, thank you all. I want to echo thank you again for having us today and allowing us to be here and talk about the issues. I'm from Hampton Roads, lived here all my life. I had the honor of being involved in McDonald's legislative aid in the mid-90s, then 5 years on Virginia City Council dealing with local government before going on to the House of Delegates, where I'm honored to have served 4 years there. Most of you have heard this story. For me, it's about the American dream. It's about making Virginia more one again for business and job growth. I started our campaign with that message April 1st of last year, and that's the message we've stuck with, and that's the message I think we need as Virginia, so we can restore economic opportunity to everyone across the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Delegate Davis. All right, and our third candidate is Senator Joe Vogel.
Thank you. It's great to be here in the fearless 3rd District. You will have a debate outside. Welcome. I'm glad to be here. I'm Jill Vogel, born and raised in the Shenandoah Valley. I'm a mom. I'm an ethics attorney. I have a practice that I started with just myself, and I built it. It's now in all 50 states, and I'm really proud to say that among the things that we did in my firm was when no one said it could be done, and the IRS was targeting conservative groups around the country, Obama's IRS, we fought them, we protected those groups, and we won. And I'm really proud of that. In addition, in my practice before serving in the legislature, I served as Deputy General Counsel at the Department of Energy, where as a young lawyer I had an amazing experience overseeing a regulatory reform for a year. I came in at the end of the Clinton administration when they had ran through a number of real job-killing regulations that affected ceiling fans and washing machines and basically were really devastating for consumers and for the private sector. So I have a lot of real-world experience that helped inform how I have governed since I've been in the legislature. And I've been a state senator for almost 10 years now. And my commitment has been to first do no harm. And I look forward to this debate and to talking to you about the things that I've worked for in the legislature, being a champion of your constitutional freedoms, your economic freedoms, and I am excited to be here, and I wish for this to be a great debate.
Awesome. All right. So this is not the Barry Griff show, okay? And it's certainly not the show of the media here. My role here is to be your umpire, okay? And so the best kind of games are where the umpire is unnoticeable. So my goal here is to make sure that we keep things moving along. Each candidate, once they get asked a question, is going to get 90 seconds to answer that question. After that question is answered, each other candidate will then get 60 seconds to answer that question. Should someone specifically be named, then that individual will receive 30 seconds to have a personal rebuttal, okay? So all the candidates have agreed to this, and that's the way that we're gonna work it. Again, not the Jim Hess show, not the show of the press. We may ask questions you may not agree with, and it might anger you. But the point is for you to look at these candidates and see how they respond. And I think we're going to start with one that you might not like to begin with. All right? This question is directed to Senator Reeves. Let's talk about ethics, sir. Let's talk about how we want our public candidates to be viewed by the general public. You, as an elected official and as a candidate, how do you view the role of ethics in politics And how do you view the legal system in terms of the role of ethics in politics?
So I would use probably one word to describe me with regard to ethics, and that's uncompromising. What I mean by that is, my whole life has been predicated on the promise and built through the examples that were before me. I have 6 great uncles that served during World War II. One's buried in the Philippines. They raised the right hand as I did to swear an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and bear true faith and allegiance to the same. As a young cadet at Texas A&M, I was taught to not take an oath, and it said a cadet will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those who do. And so when I talk about ethics, it's in everything I do in my life. As a Christian, I'm driven by that morality of ethics because it's who I am and it's in my blood. I live that. And so politics is a different place because there are politicians who shelve ethics for the good of whatever they want to do. And I'm just going to tell you, I'm unrelenting on that issue. I will not compromise on that issue. There are some issues that are just, I won't compromise my values or where I come from. Because I believe in this job that we are only here for a season to serve. And God will truly call us as long as we need to for that season, and at some point He will call us away from that. And so as long as I can go home and I can look in the mirror and I can look at my family and I can look at my pastor and I can look at those who I serve with, and I can say I've done my very best not to compromise that, and I think that's what describes where I'm at.
Thank you very much. Doug Davis, your view on this subject. 60 seconds, sir.
Sure. There's nothing more important in our system than integrity. You know, we have to make sure that we keep the confidence of the voters, and ethics is what allows that to happen. And with that comes transparency. And the most important thing we can have as elected officials is to make sure that there's complete transparency in everything from donations to our actions to our votes, so that the public understands what we do, why we do it, and what the rationale is behind it. You know, we have a gubernatorial candidate this year that had rolled out some ethics platforms and what they believe should happen. Not using campaign funds for personal use, not transferring campaign funds from one political campaign of one's to another's. And, you know, I'm the only one up here that's never done that. I ran for city council, and when I went to the House of Delegates, I never transferred that money. When I went from the House of Delegates and now I'm running for lieutenant governor, I've never made a transfer from there to the other, because I believe people support you for a position. And if you're going to keep their confidence and provide complete transparency, you honor what they've asked you and what they've supported you to do. And not only do I do it in my campaigns, but I believe we need to continue doing it in our governance as well. And I believe I've always adhered to those rules.
Thank you, Delegate Davis. Senator Vogel.
Thank you. I'm proud to say that I'm the only candidate for lieutenant governor who has made ethics reform a central theme of my campaign. I have campaigned on it as a state senate candidate. I've been in the legislature for 10 years, and every single year that I have been in the state senate, I have been an advocate for redistricting reform when that wasn't popular in my party. I've been an advocate for a gift ban when many of my colleagues in the legislature haven't supported it. And this year I introduced legislation that said no member of the legislature should be able to use campaign funds for personal use. And my colleagues didn't vote for it. In fact, one of my colleagues in this race didn't vote for it. So I can tell you that I feel really strongly about that. I happen to practice ethics law for a living. I advise people on how not to violate ethics rules, whether it's at the federal level or whether it's state charities laws. And I will tell you something, ethics matter. We are asking people for their support.
60 seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the next question over to Tony Clark.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you to the three of you for being here today, taking our questions. And the first one that I want to ask, February of last year, at the beginning of the legislative session, the majority leader made an attempt to shut the press out of the floor of the Senate. It was a clear attempt to make those in our professions' lives more difficult. But it also created more separation from the people of Virginia and those they elect to govern and legislate and serve. It's a two-part question. One, do you agree with Senator Norman's decision? And two, what sort of message do you think that move sent to the citizens of Virginia?
And this goes in the same order, so Senator Reeves, oh, I'm sorry, no, it does not go in the same order. It goes to Delegate Davis first.
Sure. You know, it works so well because there is a clear partnership between the voters, the elected officials, and the press. And a lot of the transparency that we just spoke about in the last question comes from the press. So I think we need to be very careful from separating the press from doing that job, or doing anything that looks like they can be reprimanded for what we may not like them to do. And I think it's unfortunate that maybe the interpretation of some of the signals may have been sent. I wish that that wasn't the case. It wasn't my body that was done in. But I think we need to protect the relationship between the voters, the press, and the elected officials, because that is truly recreate the transparency for everyone across the Commonwealth.
Thank you very much. Senator Vogel, your response.
I think that the more civility and the more transparency that you can have in the process, the better the process is. And I think that that was an unfortunate situation, and I think a little unnecessary, a little gratuitous, and a little probably unfair poking that wasn't very productive. And in the end, I was happy to see the press come back down and be on the Senate floor where they have close proximity to what's happening and can actually see how we all engage with one another. And I'm happy that it was resolved, and that's about all I have to say about that.
Senator Reeves, I definitely want your response on this, but I'm going to have a follow-up to this real quick. Go ahead, Senator Reeves.
So we're talking inside baseball for those of you that are listening to what this question really talks about. And I think it had to do with some personalities, maybe the majority leader and a certain editorial guy from the Richmond Times-Dispatch. But the reality is that I think you had the two-part question. Do I agree with Senator Norman? Probably not a whole lot on a lot of stuff, and we disagree, but he's our majority leader. So do I help the majority leader where I can? Absolutely. And I think that we resolved that issue. We didn't shut the press out. We just didn't let them on the floor of the Senate, because the rules of the Senate are very strict, and they're there in place for a purpose. And those were being violated in from what I've been told by those of us that are in leadership. I think the message, the second part of your question was a message to the citizens of Virginia. I thought it was a horrible message to the citizens of Virginia that we're worried about playing tiddlywinks when we have big issues to solve, and we should be focused on the things that matter most, and not really who gets what seat and where they sit and then on the floor of the Senate.
So let's do a quick follow-up here. We know that this happened under Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam, who was obviously a Democrat, and it was a Republican majority under which this happened. All of you, sorry, not both, all three of you would like to be the Republican lieutenant gubernatorial person, right, presiding over the state Senate. How would each one of you specifically, if the majority leader decided to block out the press, respond? And we'll just go Senator Vogel then.
I wouldn't exclude the press ever. That's a really important part of the process. It's an important give and take, and it's a key part of transparency, and it's a key part of what allows us to communicate with our people at home, because it allows them to understand what's happening in Richmond when we're there.
Senator Reeves.
So if you understand what the role of Lieutenant Governor is, then you can certainly understand that you should be part of that process with that caucus. While you're not actually part of the Senate caucus, you certainly have a leadership responsibility to that caucus. I think if you have the right relationships with the majority leader, being Tommy Norman, who has actually endorsed us, I think that issue wouldn't come up because you could solve that very quickly. I think Lieutenant Governor Northam kind of failed the Senate in the sense that he didn't get in front of that, and even though Republicans held the majority, he still should have worked through that process with civility and tried to avert that from happening.
Delegate Davis.
I wouldn't allow for a closeout of the press. I think we need to work to build a stronger partnership with the press and the elected officials and maintain the civility that's necessary. So the focus of the stories, the focus of the news that comes out of Richmond are on the issues that affect people's lives, not some of the political games that go on.
Thank you very much. All right, so our next question comes from Travis Main of the Daily Press, and his question goes directed to Senator Vogel.
Senator Vogel, this question will start for you. Perhaps your colleagues can weigh in on women's issues or on the relative lack of elected officials, female elected officials in the General Assembly. But you said on the John Frederick show this week that you were proud that women have never been more excited to have a Republican woman to support, but I believe all the Republican women in the General Assembly have endorsed Senator Reeves. Could you speak to that, please?
Yes, I'm happy to. Some of those endorsements are from people who are actually very good friends of mine, who endorsed Senator Reeves before I got in this race. Everybody deserves their support, and I wouldn't begrudge Senator Reeves any of the support that he has, but I will tell you, there's plenty to go around, and I can tell you for sure, as I travel around the Commonwealth of Virginia, there has never been more excitement and more support for more women in our party, more women to be involved, more women to be engaged. For so long, the left has played into this message that, our party doesn't support women, and that's not true. If you are a woman and you own a small business and you're a mom and you have a family, we are right on the issues that matter to women. Women's issues are economic freedom issues, women's issues are property rights issues, women's issues are Second Amendment issues, and I just believe that we have a lot to say to women, and we need more role models for women who are candidates, and I speak about that often when I travel around to schools, middle schools, high schools. They don't see a lot of women role models as candidates. So I hope that at the end of this campaign that we might prevail, but I hope more than anything our campaign will mean something and that we will have had an opportunity to reach more women, and particularly more young women, and encourage them to be involved in public service.
Thank you very much. Senator Reeves.
How do you want me to answer the question? If you want, can you give it the question worded to me? I think it's
Sure. Go ahead.
Why do you think all the women in the General Assembly have endorsed you, perhaps?
Well, I think part of that goes to, quite frankly, because I'm a leader, and they understand the relationships that I've have in the General Assembly, and that I have a vision, Travis, for the Commonwealth. And I talk about that vision often, and they've seen me at work in the General Assembly, and I've brought people together and worked across the aisle, and worked across the chambers, and I've worked with my female colleagues in both the House and the Senate, and I think they see something in me that speaks to them about leadership. I'm thrilled. Today, just before we got here, Alice Butler Short, who ran Women for Trump in Virginia, just endorsed us as well. And so I don't think it has to do anything with the being a woman or not being a woman. I think it has to do with who's the best person to lead the Commonwealth in the situation that we're in today. And to me, it's about leadership. That person who has the knowledge, skills, and ability to lead the Commonwealth day one. And I think that's why they've endorsed us.
Thank you, Senator Reeves. Delegate Davis.
Well, as I've been traveling around the Commonwealth, I've never seen more excitement to have an entrepreneur and a business person leading their party. People are hurting all around the Commonwealth. It's not just here, it's not just out in the South Side, it's all the way down to Southwest Virginia, as we know, and they're not caring what the person maybe looks like. They're caring about what that person can do, and they want someone that can restore economic opportunities to Virginians again. And I've got great support both from men and women all across our party, whether it's Pam Brown in Norfolk or my most important Republican lady that's endorsed me, my wife Shelley, who y'all see all over and has been an integral part of the Republican women in Hampton Roads. I'm honored to have so much support, but it's because we got the right message, because we know that we can restore economic freedom once again to Virginians, and we know that we can take back Virginia, turn it red, and make Virginia the place that we're all proud of and provide for that next generation.
Thank you very much. Diana McFarland has our next question, and it goes to you as well, Delegate Davis.
The American Society of Civil Engineers has given Virginia a D for its roads and infrastructure. And there are many ways to raise revenue to fix roads. Are you in favor of raising the gas tax, or perhaps putting a device on people's cars to measure how many miles they drive, or would you prefer to rely more on tolls?
Sure, and I apologize, the beginning part of the question, the mic was off.
Yeah, please, just go ahead and ask it all again.
Oh, the American Society of Civil Engineers has given Virginia a D when it comes to roads and infrastructure. There are many ways to raise revenue for roads. Are you willing to raise the gas tax, or seems there's a device you can put on people's cars to measure many miles they drive and tax them on that, or do you favor relying more on tolls, as we have in many places now?
Sure. Well, first off, I'm proud to be the only one up there that supported Bob McDonald's transportation plan. I know my other opponents are hitting me over the head with that, but the most important bill we've had in the last 10 years was to provide infrastructure to widen 64, widen the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, the high-rise bridge, things that we needed. I didn't put my head in the sand when I was asked to get involved in that fight. I actually stood up as a leader. I didn't run away from it. Looking forward, we have revenue now for roads, but we need to make sure that we continue to invest in that infrastructure. You see, the success of our ports is based upon our road system, and not just Hampton Roads, but even as you go out to I-81 and all that truck traffic out there, we have to make sure that we can get our trucks out there because there's so much opportunity for distribution centers out there. How we raise it, I think there's a number of things. I think public-private partnerships is a significant model that we can look at doing when they're done right. You know, you have to be careful on tolls. We saw what happened with the toll going out through the tunnel over to Portsmouth and how we had to buy it down. You know, public-private partnerships aren't inherently good or bad. It depends on the individual case basis. And we need to make sure we have a business person in office that can negotiate a good deal for the citizens, not a good deal just for the big companies.
Sounds good. Our response will come from Senator Reeves.
So I didn't vote for the last iteration of the transportation bill because I truly believe we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem, okay? And the reality is this, there are other areas, we didn't even lock up the transportation budget till this year. We were robbing Peter to pay Paul every time we wanted to do something. We just robbed the rainy day fund to cover and backfill our state employees' retirement accounts. There's a couple other areas I think we need to look at for revenue. I think now that we have a new administration in Washington that's talked about offshore energy and that development, we have leases offshore. The estimates that I have are the royalties alone from that offshore leasing is enough to help fund our transportation needs for probably the end of my lifetime. And so I'd like to start looking at those opportunities and see if we can move those forward. In fact, a couple of years ago, I carried a bill that would set up an emergency management fund to allow us the opportunity, if and when we ever started to explore offshore, we'd have a system in place for the what-ifs. And you know what? That was under a Democrat regime. Terry McAuliffe signed that bill. And because it's the right thing to do. And I went to Louisiana and I met with the Jindal folks and I went up to Congress and met with the Energy Commission to understand what it meant if we were going to go offshore. I worked with the Navy on those offshore leases. And so I think that's an opportunity we need to explore.
Thank you, Senator Reeves. Senator Vogel.
So your question is about how to fund transportation, and I will just tell you some of the key critical things we have to do first is we desperately need to reform VDOT. There are resources that have been terribly mismanaged. It wasn't just until recently that we did smart scale. Some of the most important things we need to do are set clear funding priorities. And I know when I was first elected, I introduced legislation that would actually do something as simple as an audit of VDOT to help us try to actually locate the resources that we have. And people say, oh, we can't even afford to do an audit. It was later that Lingenfelter came along and he did an audit of VDOT and we found $1.4 billion. So when you talk about, one, let's use the resources that we have more wisely. Let's prioritize our spending. Let's put a lockbox on our transportation dollars. So transportation funding is spent on transportation. And then, more importantly, let's be much more careful about when we talk about tolls. You know, in the community where I live, in parts of Northern Virginia, tolls has been a terrible bait and switch. We told people that we were going to provide tolls, that we're going to pay for new lanes, and then those tolls are paid for other things.
Thank you, Senator Vogel. We've got a follow-up here from Tony. And if, again, I do want this to be relaxed. This is a conversation. I'm trying to keep it moving along. But, you know, about 30 seconds. Tony.
This is actually my full question. I just didn't want you to do my question.
Oh, well. Oh. Well. No, it was my Facebook question, but that's okay. No, go ahead.
Well, if we could ask this as a full question, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, go ahead. Standard question. And this will be directed specifically to Senator Reeves.
Okay. Senator Reeves. The part of Western Tidewater that my newspapers represent, Southampton, Franklin, Southern Isle of Wight, have not had a lot of legislative heft in recent years, I'll put it that way. We don't carry a lot of authority in the General Assembly. And the cornerstone of Governor McDonald's transportation plan was the upgrade of Route 460, which has a direct impact on both Isle of Wight and Southampton County. With the expansion of the port and the fact that 460 and 58 both run through either Isle of Wight, Southampton, or the city of Franklin, what specifically would you do to address the transportation needs in this part of the state?
So that's a big question, Tony. There's a lot of to that. So my understanding of the original 460 was they had all kinds of issues with regard to EPA and DEQ and all those sort of things. So I'm not up to speed on exactly where that project is right now. That's not a punt. I just don't know because I'm not on transportation. So with regard to inland ports, I know that Senator Stanley carried a bill, I think it's for I-76, out towards Franklin and Franklin County in that area to help with regard to the inland ports. I supported that effort that he had because I knew what it meant to Martinsville and Danville and all those areas. And so, what you find in the Commonwealth of Virginia, especially in the General Assembly, is that it's not so much Republican Democrat as it is regionalism. And having members of your body come to you and talk to you about, hey, this is what we need in South Side and Southwest. When you look at the members from those areas, they are kind of cut out. In fact, until Bill Carrico got on the Finance Committee, Southwest didn't have anybody once they lost Puckett. And so I think they're getting more of a voice. I try to listen to reason. I have the same issue up in my district. I have a bridge that we need to get expanded. We finally got enough money appropriated to expand once. I think that's where HB2 helps. I'd have to delve into it, Tony, to kind of look and see where 460 is and how to get there. I'd be lying to you to tell you I knew exactly what to do on that specific question without having some more information. I'd need more information. I can certainly get it to you.
Senator Vogel, what do you think?
So I think his question was, what would we do to invest? And I would say, I think that the only way you're going to have economic development is actually to invest in infrastructure in the region. And I think it was, to me, a travesty that we had $250 million invested in the 460 project, only to have that project abandoned. And that goes to the underlying question that we talked about earlier, and that is, should we raise taxes and should we have tolls? Well, before we even get to that point, let's talk about doing a better job with the resources that we have. That was $250 million, and we never even stuck a shovel in the ground. And so I would tell you that we have parts of the Commonwealth of Virginia where we need economic development, where we deserve more investment in infrastructure, where something like 460 makes a big difference. But we have to get our priorities right. And we have to be looking at real metrics. What are you getting back for that investment? And I think actually there's an enormous amount that we'd recover if we actually made those investments properly.
Nelga Davis.
Sound bites are great, but when it came around to actually doing something with House Bill 2313, that transportation plan, I stood up and said yes, and I led on that when I was in the Virginia City Council. It's one thing to vote against something because you don't like it, but when it's the most important bill in a decade, if you're going to say no, you better have your own plan. And if you can't trust someone then, how do you trust them now? 460, I was on City Council when that thing started going south, and that was important for a couple of reasons. One, because of the economic opportunity from the port. The second reason is because Hampton Roads is a cul-de-sac, and that was our evacuation plan. God forbid something happened and we had a Class 3, Class 4 hurricane coming through. So we have to do something with these roads because not only do we still need that evacuation plan, but we have to make sure the infrastructure's there for the trucks when they come out of that port. Because there's so much economic opportunity down this corridor, and I'll tell you, it is sad that in some areas like Franklin that they feel that they're not represented because they don't have seniority in their leadership in the House of Delegates. But the way I look at it, I'm a business person. I put the dollars in place where I get the greatest return on my dollars. And if I look at the economic opportunity in places like Franklin or even Southwest Virginia and some of those other areas, I get a better bang for my dollar investing in economic development there than a lot of these other areas that get traditionally the majority of the attention. So a lot of my focus would be on Franklin just because the economic impact is so great.
Got it. Let's do a quick follow-up on this, okay? Because I think it's a lot of fun. One thing I didn't do in terms of introductions is Senator Vogel was first elected 2007 to the Senate. We had Senator Reeves, elected in 2011, again, to the state senate. And we had Delegate Glenn Davis, elected in 2013 to the House of Delegates. If my memory is correct, House Bill 3202, which was the largest transportation tax increase in the history of the Commonwealth of Virginia, occurred, I want to say, in 2013. And so I guess bringing up those elected numbers, obviously the two state senators were there, and the member of the House Delegates was not, but he was on city council. How do you feel in terms of that follow-up? How do you feel about House Bill 3202, and has it been effective for the Commonwealth of Virginia? And then again, it's a follow-up, so about 30 seconds. Let's go ahead and start, since you just ended Delegate Davis. Let's start with you.
Sure. I was asked to get involved in House Bill 3202 back in 2013 when I was on city council, because they were looking for the local governments to get involved in support of this, and I was happy to do so. And looking at what it's done so far, you know, it may have not been the perfect bill. Nothing is ever perfect. But we've been working for a decade on transportation funding to solve our infrastructure issues that we had. And so far, you see the widening of 64 now as you head on out to Richmond, that's using that funding. You see the high-rise bridge opportunities, and that's because of that funding. You've heard about now recently, we're going to be expanding the Hampshire Bridge Tunnel, and that's using that funding. And then you look to Northern Virginia, and then you got the same opportunities up there in Northern Virginia. So I'm pleased with it, because it may have not been the perfect bill, but it was progress. And that's what we need to, once again, create economic opportunity in Virginia.
Senator Vogel, your thoughts on this?
I didn't vote for the bill in 2013. I'm the only person running for lieutenant governor who signed a no tax pledge. I signed that 10 years ago, and I've never broken it. You could do great things for infrastructure, for investment in Virginia, without raising people's taxes. That bill was half-baked. It wasn't ready for prime time. It didn't have any of the matrix that actually mattered. It didn't have smart scale. And you know, some of the big things that have actually improved transportation didn't come out of HB 3202. It came out of things like the Federal Defense Act that actually put money in to expand 66 in Northern Virginia. So I would argue that it wasn't all the way there.
Senator Reeves.
So I think that bill did do some progress. I also think it delegates some authority down to some local jurisdictions for those local folks. If they want to have the ability to tax their people, then that's up to those local folks. And I know Nova and the beach area have that authority to do that now. And so I would say I didn't vote for the bill. I thought it was too much, too far. I do think there are other avenues to which we can raise funds to do that. I know I live in some days I'm considered Northern Virginia where I live and what I represent. It just depends on tax dollars. But I would tell you, I drive 95 consistently to Northern Virginia and up to DC and that area, and I will tell you that the hot lanes have done tremendous things for us. But there's a bridge too far, it's too much taxes. I still believe in the motto that we can find the monies. We spend a lot of money in a lot of different areas that we don't need to spend money in. And I can certainly go in the budget and tell you some of those places.
Thanks. Understood. Travis. Next question, please, sir. Your question, yep, I am all over the place here, aren't I? Your question will be for Senator Vogel.
Senator Vogel, Senator Reeves released a commercial this week depicting terrorists living in a suburban neighborhood, masked men in fatigues, rushing to a van with large bags, scaring a woman and her children across the street. What'd you think of that ad?
Well, I won't really comment on the ad. I think maybe the ad goes to the question of what is the role of the lieutenant governor. And I think each of us has a message that we're trying to impart about what we think the responsibility of the lieutenant governor would be, and I think his is focused on ISIS, and that was really what he was trying to impart in that ad. My view of the role of the lieutenant governor would be to take it back what it used to be and make it mean something again. And that would be, my great hope, would be one, to be the chief jobs creation officer, the way it was back when Lieutenant Governor Bowling was lieutenant governor, and he actually was out there trying to spur on economic development, working with a strong governor. And something else that has been a big feature of what I tried to work on in a bill that I carried this year, and that's regulatory reform. And I mentioned that when I was Deputy General Counsel at the Department of Energy, regulatory rollback was something I worked on. It's something that I focused on in the legislature, and I would love to be the Minister of Regulatory Reform. Something that the Lieutenant Governor could actually lead on. So those are the things that I think that the Lieutenant Governor should focus on, and I would hope that, you know, when my ads come out, that would be something that we'll be communicating as part of our big message.
Senator Reeves, it is your time to respond. Also, since you were mentioned, you get an extra 30 seconds.
So I would just tell you, that ad did exactly what I thought it would do. It would rile up the left, because the reality is there were 9 ISIS members arrested in Northern Virginia. We can stick our head in a hole and say it doesn't exist around us. But we need people that understand what it is to fight the enemy at the ground level. I've looked at evil in the face. I served as a police officer, a narcotics detective, and an Army Ranger. So if you want leadership that understands how to face those kind of folks, then hire me. I'll also tell you, I find it amazing that one of my colleagues here starts mentioning about regulatory reform just after we announced it on the Joe Thomas show the other day about setting up a commission in the Lieutenant Governor's office to exactly do that. And I'd love to get to talk about some substantial things. But that ad, I think, is a great ad because it got people talking and it's shaking up everybody. And I think it brings an awareness of the world that we live in today.
Thank you. Delegate Davis.
Sure. Well, I think the ad brought awareness to something that it was desired to bring awareness to. Obviously, crimes and gangs are a big problem we have in Virginia. You know, MS-13 is something tremendous, 18th Street. Another gang is something that's been growing in Virginia. The Crips have been growing. We have so much when it comes to gang issues and crime issues, and not to mention opioids. But that's not where my focus is on the campaign. It's part of what we need to do to make sure we make Virginia where we want to get is to get crime down, and I understand the gang issue, and we're working towards making our streets safer. But we ran to start this by making sure that we create economic opportunity for everyone, and that's where I'm going. When you see our ads and our commercials, it's focused on making Virginia number one. It's great to be the job creation officer, which is where I want to be, but it's helpful if you actually created jobs before you decide to be the job creation officer. You know, if you look at the bills that we've all put in the past, they'll show you what we're going to be passionate about in the future. And I average probably 5 bills a year when it comes to tax reform and helping small businesses. Everyone else you can probably just count on one hand, you probably don't need 2. We all have different passions. We all have great experiences in the past. But those passions, those experiences is what leads us to make a difference going forward. And what I can make a difference is creating economic opportunity across the Commonwealth. And that's what I've been doing on this campaign.
Thank you, Delegate Davis. Appreciate it. Diana, before we take a very quick break, let the candidates stretch out a little bit and everybody have the opportunity to just kind of take a pause. You have the last question, and it is going to be in order, just so everybody has heads up. It's going to go to Delegate Davis, and then to Senator Reeves, and then to Senator Vogel.
Delegate Davis, you are in favor of expanding the coal industry. However, Virginia Power just announced last week that it's pushing towards solar along with natural gas and nuclear. And I always say that wrong, sorry. Why do you favor expanding the coal industry, and how do you plan to do that?
Well, they're not mutually exclusive. You see, I believe in using coal for energy just like we do today, but I also believe in a 21st century coal industry that isn't just about burning coal. When I was out in Southwest Virginia last year, 4 times in 2 months, they're hurting out there, and I wanted to find a solution, and what can we use coal for? And that led me out to MIT. You see, they're doing some research out there. It's a 3-year grant to look at replacing silicon with powdered coal. It's a pure conductor in things like computer electronics as well as in solar panels. It may be powdered coal that makes solar panels viable. You see, it takes several layers of silicon to have the same sunlight absorption and energy transference as 1 layer of powdered coal. So I want to expand the coal industry and revitalize that area. But I think we can do it by making Southwest Virginia the 21st century Silicon Valley, and it's used for coal far beyond just creating energy for us.
Thank you. Senator Reeves.
So there were 80,000 jobs, at least that's what I've been told, in the coal industry, and now we're down to about 2,000. And so because of this overburdening regulatory process from the federal government who put these mandates that couldn't even be reached because the technology doesn't even exist to get to the parts per million through a smokestack out at the Virginia City plant, which is, I must say, one of the cleanest burning biofuels and coal plants in the country, they've had to restructure. Dominion's had to restructure. They're trying to go back to natural gas. They're trying to find other types of energy development, things that they can burn a little more cleaner. And so they've already, that ship has sailed. They're spending the money on it. That's the direction they're heading. And so, you know, I will tell you that I think those people in Southwest Virginia, because I've been there enough times, they just want an opportunity to succeed. In order to do that, they're going to have to do that through education and workforce development and retrain some of these folks. You've never seen a prouder family than you look at a family that has 3 generations of coal miners in there, and they look at each other and they're going, what do we do next? We need to come to them with opportunities so they can seek that road to prosperity. The only way I know to get there. Thank you.
Yeah, understood. Senator Vogel.
I think we need a comprehensive energy policy for the Commonwealth of Virginia that leverages free markets, that reduces regulation, and I think that's what's had such a devastating impact on Southwest Virginia. I would like for us to have an opportunity for coal to succeed in Southwest Virginia, but we also have to be realistic about what the current economy is like and what the reality is for coal. And so while I think there's a place for coal, I think we also have to be forward-thinking and understand that there are new energies and a new economy that we also want to embrace and that we want to leverage, because I think that's how we bring economic development to the Commonwealth. And I think that we have to invest in Southwest Virginia in new ways and incentivize companies to come to Southwest Virginia for other reasons as well.
Thank you very much. All right. But at the same time, through Facebook and through Twitter, and of course, the flagship, BaronGrift.com, we received a few questions, and I do want that audience to have an opportunity to participate in this discussion. And so our question will come from Richard Statman of Charlottesville, Virginia, and this will be directed to Senator Vogel, then Delegate Davis, and then Senator Reeves. And it's a good one. I actually have thought about this myself a couple times as well. The Lieutenant Governor serves on the 24-person Board of Directors of the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. Please state any one idea for Virginia economic development to present to the partnership, and please state why you are best qualified to guide that idea to action and positive development for our Commonwealth.
So, as I've mentioned before, I would love for Virginia to move forward as an economic development matter, pushing regulatory reform. And you know, the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, I recently met with those guys, and they impressed me with some of the research that they've done on what Canada did. When Canada's economy was lagging in the 1990s, they went back and instead of figuring out about, you know, raising taxes to generate more revenue, they actually went back and looked at what the regulatory environment was doing in Canada. And in British Columbia, they decided that they were going to go back and actually do a massive regulatory rollback. And again, something I've done when I was Deputy General Counsel of the Department of Energy, a big bill that I passed this legislative session on regulatory reform, and something that I would love to take to the business community and help sort of leverage their experience and get their buy-in and help us work together to push forward to do that in Virginia. It would have an enormous impact, and it did in British Columbia. They were so over-regulated in Canada that they regulated the size of TV screens in restaurants. And what happens is it's cumulative. The regulated community, over time, gets regulated because years and years and years of regulations pile on. They get old, they become irrelevant. And you know, regulations for a new homeowner, the cost of a new house, 20% of the cost of a new home in Virginia is merely the cost of regulations. Some of those are valuable, all of them are not. So I can tell you, that would be the #1 thing I would push in terms of my role, my responsibility, my ability to move forward with economic development and working with VEDP would be to try to focus on working on it.
Thank you. Delegate Davis.
Well, VDEP actually is the marketing arm for Virginia. I guess we can saddle them with regulatory rollback, but I've been doing that since I've been there, so I'll do that myself. What I want to use VDEP for is to go out there and bring businesses here. And there's a couple things we can do with VDEP. One is they are the marketing arm, but we actually don't market that well in Virginia. We get our lunch eaten so much by so many other states. For example, cybersecurity. Maryland, everyone talks about Maryland cybersecurity initiatives and that's the place to be, but they don't have the silver bullet. They're just really good about talking about themselves. I chaired the cybersecurity subcommittee a couple years ago, and we can actually and should be Cyber Alley, and we should be leading on this whole new industry. Secondly, with what I'm working with them now on, the VDAP is getting ready to send some people over to Germany. And they called me right at the end of the session because they want to send those people to Germany on over to Estonia to talk to a company that I met with when I was in Estonia. And that's the world leader on ultracapacitors because there's an opportunity to bring them back to Virginia. So I've been working with VDAP on this campaign because I'm not going to wait until I'm Lieutenant Governor to start making us #1 again for business and job growth.
Thank you. Senator Reese.
So I announced it on Thursday or Friday about setting up a commission because you have to understand how you affect business. And you know, I think I'm probably the only one up here, and I could be wrong, and you all can correct me, but I think I'm the only one who's ever built a commercial building and had to go through the process, through localities, through rezoning, through the DEQ, through VDOT, through the utilities, trying to do all these different things to build a commercial building. And I learned a lot from that. And I learned how much of an impediment it can be through the regulatory burden and whether people view things of what you're doing, the standards, as objective or subjective and all those sort of things. I also faced it when I started my insurance agency and all that federal stuff that goes along with mutual funds and variable products and property, life, and casualty insurance and all those things. So I understand it, and so that's why I was so big on releasing this the other day was we need a direct pathway from business owners to people who can execute and fix issues. Right now that process goes to a lobbying firm or some other attorney, and then they lobby those of us in the General Assembly to change a bill. Well, we don't always need to change a bill or have a law written. We can use the executive authority to do that as well. I'd like to be that clearinghouse to take those complaints. I think that would roll back some of those regulations. Would be fine. Thank you.
Well, we can expand on that, Diana. We're in a reverse order. So Diana for Senator Reese.
Changing the subject here. Senator Reese. Virginia's approach to drawing election districts has used the winner takes all.
You're going to, Diana, I hate to tell you this. I've got a hearing loss from the military, so you're going to have to talk pretty loud for me.
And I don't talk about it. Virginia's approach to drawing election districts uses the winner takes all approach. That is the dominant party is in charge of that. Are you in favor of a more bipartisan approach, either through an independent body or judges, to create districts that are more competitive?
So I don't know if the audience knows this, but I'm barely in my Senate seat by 4 houses. And I probably have probably one of those districts that was one that got gerrymandered. In 2007, my opponent, then Ed Houck, every district that he lost was cut out of to a Republican. Chris Yakubowski was cut out. So I actually represent a fairly Democratic district. And so I certainly know what that process has done. I've been an advocate for reform on this issue each and every year. I do believe that we've got to find some continuity with regard to lines and, you know, all that sort of stuff. So I'm certainly open-minded to it. I do think it'll always be a political process, regardless of who you put on or appoint to a committee, because people carry prejudice and they also carry their beliefs. And so there's always, at some point, whether you delegate that authority, you continue to leave it in the General Assembly's hands, you're going to have that happen. And so that's kind of my thought process on redistricting.
Thank you. Delegate Davis.
Sure, I've always been supportive of redistricting as well. You know, it's one of those things where we need to take as much of the political process out of it as possible. We're never going to get it all out. We can write legislation that prevents some of that politics coming into play, but if anyone thinks that we're going to have an unbiased commission come into play that's going to do it, you know, the problem with that is we're all human. We all have a bias. So I think we can have redistricting reform that takes some of it out. I don't think we'll ever get to an unbiased scenario, but I think we can probably get to a point where we're maybe better off than we are today.
Thank you. Senator Vogel.
I've carried legislation almost every year that I've been in the legislature that would implement redistricting reform and make districts that are fairer and more compact and more contiguous and that keep communities of common interest together. Because here's what I think voters deserve. I think voters deserve to actually select those who represent them versus elected office holders getting to choose their voters. And that's ultimately what happens when you don't have a fair redistricting process.
Thank you. Travis Swain. For Senator Vogel.
Senator, this same question for everybody here, but probably the most important, or at least the highest profile thing the Lieutenant Governor does is break ties in the Senate when they do occur. Are there any issues where you would not side with the Republican majority, where you know you feel a little bit differently about an issue than the Republican majority in the Senate has come down on in the past?
I'm glad you asked that question. There have been many occasions since I've been elected that I haven't voted with my caucus. And I think that it's really important that you put principle over party, period. I'm elected to represent the best interests of the constituents and the community that I represent. I'm elected to vote my conscience, and I'm elected to vote what's important, not what a partisan interest or what a caucus believes is in their best interest, or what might be in the best interest for a future election. So of course, there will be times when I won't vote in the interest, or in the same way my caucus might vote. And there have been plenty of times when that's happened. Certainly when I was first elected, I joined with a bipartisan group of freshmen, and I broke with my caucus on redistricting reform. I broke with my caucus on some issues related to the environment, clean air and clean water. That was a major priority of mine. Republicans have gotten a really bad rap that somehow we are bad on issues related to the environment. That's not true. I was really, really proud that the same year that I was the #1 only member of the Senate to get a 100% score with the Northern Virginia Chamber was the same year that I got a perfect score on my environmental votes. They're not mutually exclusive. And so I will tell you that there are times when it's really important to vote principle over just what, sort of a knee-jerk partisan reaction might require.
Thank you. Senator Reese.
Can you just repeat the question, because I was writing as you were
The
talking?
question is, given the status that the Lieutenant Governor has as a tiebreaker, if ties come up, are there certain issues where you would not necessarily break the tie for the Republican Party, where you would not necessarily support the position that the Senate Republican majority has in recent years supported?
So one issue I just say that I've always stood out for is justice reform. And I've carried the bill the last 4 years. I didn't carry this last year to raise the larceny rate. And right now the larceny rate in 1981 was set at $200 for a felony. And I look out and I have a teenager, I have one in college, and I have a teenager at home who's done some boneheaded things. And if he wound up picking up an iPhone that he found and had it in his pocket and it was reported stolen, he could be charged with a felony. And $200 might not seem like a whole lot, maybe it's a whole lot to some people, but I can tell you, we probably shouldn't be charging people for a felony for $200. It's nice to be listed #1, but maybe not in this case. And so I think that's probably one issue where I probably differ from my colleagues on, that I'd probably stand for that issue alone and try to get that passed. I've worked on it in a bipartisan fashion, and that's probably the one issue I'd talk about.
Doug Davis.
Travis, when you mentioned the question, you said the highest profile thing that LG does is probably break ties, but I can assure you, during my tenure, that won't be the highest profile thing that I get to do. You'll be hearing a lot more about me bringing jobs to the Commonwealth than you will about breaking ties. But if that should happen, I've always believed principles come first, and you vote the way your conscience drives you. You vote the way your constituents drive you. But I also believe in creating win-win solutions. I don't always believe that you have black and white. You can work to create those win-win scenarios and bring everyone together. Where things might come around that I find myself breaking ties, and maybe the opposite side is regulatory and tax reform. You see, we can all talk about wanting to do regulatory and tax reform up here, but I've seen my bills get killed in the House, and I've seen people talk about them in the Senate. Not every Republican wants that heavy lift. When you start talking about helping small businesses, and you realize what we need to do to have tax reform and regulatory reform to help them, and you realize maybe it hurts that out-of-state big business, and all of a sudden some people get shaky.
Right.
So it's time that we look at that as well.
Thank you. Before Tony asks this question, just kind of a fun thing, and this is like really inside baseball, so I apologize to the audience, but who's seen the safe up close and personal? The SAFE.
Who's seen this?
The SAFE. The Lieutenant Gubernatorial SAFE.
I've never been invited over there.
Either.
All right.
I've never seen the safe.
I have.
I saw it on,
Bill Bowling was Lieutenant Governor, so I'll make that clear. All right, obscure question number one, had to happen. Tony.
I want to hear more about the safe.
Yeah, it's good stuff. No, well,
I don't think anybody here knows about the safe.
The Lieutenant Gubernatorial office is in the former Treasury of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and there's this big, humongous safe in the conference room. And so I was just curious if any of our candidates had actually been in the conference room of the Lieutenant Governor's office. Again, obscure question 101. Thank you. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. In 1999 in Franklin, the International Paper Mill, or what was at the time the Union Camp Mill, was purchased by International Paper. And the plant that employed 2,500 people with significant middle-class incomes and above were cut in half. Those jobs were immediately eliminated or reassigned to International Paper's Memphis headquarters. 10 years later, the mill closed. And so that source of 2,500 jobs was eliminated. Of course, you all know, I hope the mill has since reopened, but only employs about 250 people at significantly lower wages. When discussing economic development, most statewide candidates find it most appropriate to talk about southwestern Virginia. Almost every single time, however, here in southeastern Virginia, we're also concerned about jobs. What each one of you do to make it easier for small rural communities like Franklin, Southampton, and Isle of Wight counties to compete for economic development?
This goes to Senator Reeves, and then Senator Vogel, and then Delegate Davis.
So I think there's quite a bit we can do, and I talked about it earlier. And one is to make sure that our schools are adequately training our young people for the jobs in the 21st century. There are other avenues besides going to college or getting an advanced degree or doing all those sort of things, traditional pathways. I carried a couple bills this year that would help do that, would allow teachers the ability, or school boards and superintendents the ability to hire those coming out of the trades to be vo-tech teachers and start working that way. We need to look at our internships and our apprenticeships and start working with these young people before they get out into the workforce to start driving that. Government's not in the business of, they shouldn't be in the business, they are lately, of picking winners and losers, right? What is the role of government? Is government to come in and give you everything you want? I don't think so. That's not what I believe. I believe that if you have the will and the firepower and you want to get it done, should we provide resources or the opportunity to get resources and do some public-private partnership? Absolutely. But I think it's upon individuals themselves as well to pull themselves out of where they are and seek better opportunities. Can I help that a private company went out of business because maybe their product is not used as much lately because we're scaling back and computers are doing more? Companies have to ship. Blockbuster's not here anymore either. What happened to all the Blockbuster employees and the Blockbuster owners? So with technology, it takes changes, and I think part of that is educational change and being able to adapt to the changes that are coming, and I think we need to do more of that.
Thank you. Senator Vogel.
So 80% of the growth comes from small business. And so more small businesses are now, more people are leaving the Commonwealth of Virginia that are coming to the Commonwealth of Virginia. And you consider that is unbelievable. When you consider that we have some of the best trained workforce, we have the best colleges and universities in the country, we have extraordinary infrastructure, and yet people are leaving. And why are they leaving? We could be attracting them to Southwest Virginia, we could be attracting them to Southeast Virginia. It's the tax climate, it's B-poll. It's some of the things that we have not gone back to address considering our tax code since 1972. Shame on us. And that's really a function of benign neglect because we've been resting on our laurels and haven't done anything while other states are really pushing forward with great innovation. They are doing regulatory reform, and most of all, they're really addressing the issues related to their tax climate because businesses and people are like geese. This is a very transient economy. People and businesses will migrate to where the tax climate is better. And North Carolina, to our south, not very far away, is taking their
Right.
business tax from 6% to 3% to 0. And we're at 6%, so it's easy to move. I had a bill this year that would have taken our business tax from 6% to 3% by just simply returning your surplus.
Got it.
So that would help Southeast Virginia. Just a second.
Doug Davis.
You know, it was a sad day when IP closed, and same thing with the board plant over in Norfolk. And it's not a lack of skilled labor of why no one came to backfill so quickly, because there's a lot of skilled labor here in Franklin and in Norfolk as well. It's because we couldn't diversify the economy, we couldn't bring in the other businesses. But it's not just about taxes. You see, we need robust solutions. Someone mentioned schools, but it's not just schools for training the students, but we have to have good quality schools. Because companies will not come to an area if they don't think they can get good skilled labor to follow them and stay here. And if we don't have good quality schools, that's not going to happen. They're also looking for a transportation infrastructure as well. And unfortunately, it was quite a while since we invested in our transportation infrastructure until 2013 came around. And we need to continue doing that. And the third thing we need to do is make sure we have high-speed bandwidth. You know, that will diversify the economy more here than anywhere else in the state. We all know about that huge pipeline, and I say bandwidth pipeline, coming over from overseas. You know that you'll be able to execute a trade in the London Stock Exchange quicker than you'll be able to execute one in the New York Stock Exchange from here in Hampton Roads very soon. So if we take advantage of that and work on our infrastructure, we won't have to worry about the next entity that decides to leave the area, because we'll have so many other areas that our employees can go to after that.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So here we are. We are at 2:40 in the afternoon. I was told that we needed to wrap this up at 2:50. We have not had an audience question yet, but I do have one here. Stephen Hogg, are you here?
Right over here.
Is there a Stephen Hogg? Okay, cool. All right. I am not going to ask your exact question, but you are getting a mug, okay, for sure. So come see me here shortly. One thing we have not asked yet is the role of the federal government in terms of the state, and how the lieutenant governor actually plays a part in that relationship. And I want to actually add another layer onto this. What is your relationship to local government? And so, as the lieutenant governor, again, codified in the Constitution, specifically, all you're supposed to do is break ties in the state Senate. What are you going to do in terms of fostering a relationship between all levels of government? And we'll just make this easy. We'll just go from Delegate Davis down to Senator Vogel.
Sure. Well, I've already started that process going back to when I was first elected to Virginia City Council. I served 5 years on City Council in Virginia Beach. I worked on a lot of regional solutions with other local bodies all across Hampton Roads, and I was on the VML Board of Directors on their legislative committee for a number of years, so I worked with local governments across the Commonwealth. At the federal level, like many of us, I've worked with our congressmen and our used to be Republican senators back in the day, but we need to get a couple of new ones now that have Republicans there, to make sure that they don't get in the way of state progress. You see, the problem is the federal government should just kind of get out of the way. They should do what they need to do, make sure they have the standing armies, make sure they provide safety and protection at that level. But when it comes to sending down federal revenues, there shouldn't be any strings attached. They need to let the states do with it as we know what needs to be done to best provide for our citizens. And that's what I'll continue doing, is working both with the local and federal electeds to make sure we get the best solutions here, to make sure we provide those economic opportunities for everyone across the Commonwealth.
Thank you. Senator Reese.
I love your cheering crowd. At 420. He's hitting home runs over the fence over there. Let me just say, it's about relationships, man. This whole political stuff's all about relationships, and you're absolutely correct. The lieutenant governor doesn't have a whole lot of duties, and that's why I've always been saying that it's the perfect opportunity for someone who understands what a 2IC, a second in charge, can really do. You know, Donald Trump didn't hire Mike Pence to sit on his laurels and just be the deciding vote in the Senate. He hired Mike Pence because he has the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities to get things done. He was a congressman, he was a governor. He has those abilities to create relationships. I've worked on that stuff already. I'm the guy who got reciprocity restored. The only Republican in the room with the governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of public safety, governor's chief counsel, and Chad Peterson, and hammered out that deal. I've worked up in Congress already trying to get the offshore drilling bill done and talked to my colleagues up there consistently about issues, whether that be veterans issues that I'm facing with a vet who has a real problem and working through that process. It's about bringing people together.
Got it.
That's what it's about. I've been able to do that in the 5 years that I've been in the Senate. I think we've had 72 pieces of legislation passed. Don't hold me to that number. I'm sure it changes because we carry a lot in the Senate. But all my bills, in the most part, are bipartisan because I believe in bringing the best and the brightest and everyone we can into a consensus. And that's what the Lieutenant Governor's job should be, is being the builder of consensus and bringing people together for the good of the Commonwealth.
Thank you. Senator Vogel.
Well, my view is government closest to the people governs best. And so my relationships with localities has always been great, to work with local governments, but most of all to keep the state out of the way. Localities hate mandates from the states, the way the state hates mandates from the federal government. And so while as Lieutenant Governor, you don't have a whole lot of authority over what the federal government does, and you sure don't have a whole lot of authority over what localities do. The idea is that you are a facilitator. You are there to keep lines of communication open. And again, I go back to what my opening statement was: first, do no harm. Work well with others, and try to do as little as possible to allow this ongoing forward marching effort and overreach, where the federal government is constantly pushing down on states, and states are pushing down on localities, because that's where we have found ourselves in a world of hurt.
Thank you very much. We folks have run out of time in order to get the closing statements in and just wrap everything up. I just want to thank everyone here for a wonderful conversation. Obviously, there's so many questions that we could continue to do, but first of all, Diana McFarland, Travis Spain, Tony Clark, thank you so much for being panelists today and offering your extremely insightful questions. It made this a much more valuable experience. Thank you so much to Charlie Daniels Racing for hosting us here today, for sure. Good stuff. And of course, the 3rd Congressional District, Jennifer Lee, as chairman of the Republican Party here in this district. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm not the official wrap-up guy, but I am doing this for our online audience as well, so that they can hear this. We do have closing statements. And by order of the draw, the order will go Senator Vogel, Delegate Davis, and Senator Reeves. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. It was great to be with you. We have 37 days until this primary. And I would just beg you all to consider our campaign and to come out and support us on June 13th. I just want to tell you, I'm the only candidate running for Lieutenant Governor who signed a no tax pledge. I'm the only candidate running for Lieutenant Governor who has never let you down on pushing forward and fighting for your constitutional freedoms. I'm the only candidate who's A+ rated by the NRA. I was endorsed by the VCDL PAC. And I'm the only candidate in this race who has never attacked my opponents. I've never run one negative ad, and I promise you, people appreciate that. In the conversation about public policy, in the conversation around elections. And I can do that and win in this primary with a positive campaign, and I promise you I can do that in November. And we can win by bringing independents and Democrats and Green Party and everybody into our party in November, because we have a lot to offer, and we have the best to offer Virginia, and I would love to have your support in this race. Thank you so much.
Delegate Davis.
Well, first I want to thank everyone for having this for us and a chance to come together again and talk about the issues. Let's be clear, I started this race on April 1st of last year to make Virginia #1 again for business and job growth. My first flyer had a 4-point plan to do that. The flyer you hold today has the same 4-point plan. And that's what we've been running on, because people need opportunities all across the Commonwealth. That's why I went to Estonia for coal. That's why I went to MIT. I'm looking for those solutions to already start doing this. Everyone can talk about sound bites, and they make you feel really good, but at the end of the day, you got to put details behind them. So look at someone's resume, because I'm the only one up here that's started a company and grown it and taken it nationwide. I have been responsible for over 200 families across the U.S. at one point. I'm the only one up here that truly is focused on helping small businesses and doing tax reform. I don't have to have a plank in my plan that says I'm going to outsource regulatory policies and I'm going to have someone else help on tax reform. I know this stuff. That's why I'm running. I'm ready to do it. I've already carried bills to do it. And you know, we have to win in November. As much as all of us want to be lieutenant governor so we can make a difference, we need a Republican governor and a Republican attorney general. And the last time we had that was in 2009 when we won. And we had a great regional ticket. Bob McDonald from Hampton Roads, Bill Bowling from Richmond, and Ken Cuccinelli from Northern Virginia. You see, we have to win in November. We need to control those population centers, and I'm the only one south of Richmond running. So if we have that great ticket, we will win in November, and we will have a unified ticket. And, you know, I have to say something here. If you can't stand on your policies, it's not an attack if someone brings up the fact that you got a policy wrong trying to create tax reform. If you can't back up your own policies in a Republican debate, God help you when it comes time to back them up with a Democrat. So, I think we can get that. Thank you again.
Senators.
You know, I've spent the entirety of my adult life living by a very simple code. Honor God, love my family, and protect this country. And I've done that. I've done that. I've taken that oath. I've led men in places where you'd never want to go. I've jumped out of airplanes, had all kinds of things done to me. I served in uniform as a police officer, and I'd like to thank that sheriff deputy because he's been standing around here all day. Thank you very much for being here today. The world we live in today is a lot different than when my great uncles served during World War II. And I got 6 of them, and those were my role models. Greatest generation. When we talk about morals and values and honor, that's what I talk about. Because that was the example set before me, guys. I'm a blue-collar kid. My dad's 80 years old, and you know what he does for a living today? He drives a school bus. No one in my family ever got a college degree, much less a master's degree. They all served in uniform, they were enlisted. My brother and I are the first officers. Couldn't be prouder. I'm running for lieutenant governor because I believe in Virginia and I believe in you. And I believe together we can do just about anything. We can help people recover from the unexpected. We can help them realize their dreams. We can also protect our families and watch our families grow. People want to be safe in their homes. They want a good job with a good wage. And they want to live in a country that's full of liberty and freedom. That's what America stands for, to be exceptional again. I've lived my whole life by that honor and that code. It's served me well. We've done a lot of great things. I would encourage all of you to go pull up our websites and also pull up our voting records and what we've said and how we've led. With that, I will leave you with this. One of the greatest presidents in the whole world is a guy named Ronald Reagan. And he said that we have the opportunity to stand for something in this country, for fairness, for freedom, and for liberty. Liberty. And that these are the things worth fighting for and worth devoting our very lives to. Ladies and gentlemen, I understand that oath because I've taken it a couple of times and give my very life if I have to. I love this country, I love this state. I'd love to be your next lieutenant governor and ask for your vote.
Thank you very much. Folks, again, here is Jimmy right now.